So this week doesn't really get going until Friday, July 4th. And everything before that, well, it's build up, it's texture, it's a few personal, emotional notes at the start of the week. There's some low key irritability, some surprise, and maybe even a moment to say what you actually think. But Friday, well, that's when everything really gets going. Friday, July 4th is one of those days where the astrology is louder than the headlines. And in some cases, it may even predict the news of the future. Welcome to the Horoscope Vault, a podcast that explores the world through the lens of astrology, with a view to supporting you through the ups and downs of life, helping you make more confident decisions through each chapter. I'm Charlie, an associate member of the American Federation of Astrologers and astrology reader for radio's The Bob and Sherry Show. And a necessary congratulations to the Bob and Sherry Show because amazing news, the show has been inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame, which the team and everybody to do with the Bob and Sherry Show absolutely deserves. Such a fantastic group of people. And if you're new to the Bob and Cherry Show, I will link where you can find it in the show notes below. But this episode you are listening to now is your walk through the week astrologically, plus the weekly horoscopes to get you ready for the fireworks coming. And no, that is not just the holiday celebrations. So here's the thing about this week, it's the kind of week that trickles in, with Monday through Wednesday carrying this very private, low volume tone. It's emotionally driven, a little bit reactive in places. The opening of the week really is not headline kind of energy. And you have a few classic moon aspects, ones that show up so often that they feel very familiar and it's more like background noise. The subtle lunar ripples are actually leading you somewhere. They're kind of clearing the space for what is to develop on Friday. Because Friday is loud, Friday is layered. It's the kind of astrology that doesn't just play out personally, it echoes. And you feel it in the news, in your bank account, in your relationships, and things do or don't feel aligned. And that's entirely depending on how you handle the things that transpire. So, Monday through Wednesday, moon aspects, especially moon aspects that happen frequently, show up. The moon is the quickest moving body that we follow in astrology. So, for example, every single month, there is a moon Mars conjunction, just like the one happening on Monday, June the 30th. And the frequency of these aspects make them easier to handle because of the familiarity. And so I don't often hang around in explaining those unless the in depth subscriber only episodes call for it, or there is a necessary kind of explanation needed in the run up to something bigger. So this week, those moon aspects lead to that bigger astrological moment, which is Friday, July 4th. But first, really dialing in on Monday. Monday's kind of irritable. It's like life sits beneath this perfectionist umbrella, and things feel as though they're not going to plan because they're not going how your mind thinks they should. This is a time when you could feel frustrated or some kind of unpleasant or dreaded duty that you need to take care of, and doing so may put you in a bit of a sour mood. Monday really requires a lot more alone time than you may give yourself, and I would say some kind of midday nap. So on Monday, if the chores are not done to standard, or if food isn't like, you know, full breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and instead you're just picking and grazing your way through the day based on what's accessible with the time and the food resources you have, Monday's just kind of like this day where you say, it is what it is. And it's really Monday's irritability and things not going as expected or desired that opens the way for Tuesday's moon in Virgo trine Uranus in Taurus. So, a dreary Moon Mars conjunction on Monday, followed by a surprise on Tuesday that is much more pleasant than the unpleasantness of the day before. So, Tuesday, you could expect a surprise of some kind, a chance appearance of an old friend, a little bit of a cash flow that you weren't bargaining on, a change in your routine that actually turns out for the better. And this is kind of still in keeping with the idea that things do not go as expected, but the difference is that on Monday, this lack of predictability and order is infuriating, but by Tuesday, you kind of realize, like, oh, okay, this is why everything happened that way. Or you simply get a thrill or a benefit somehow out of the fact that things are not going according to plan. By Wednesday, the moon in Libra sextiles Mercury in Leo. It brings you back to routine. This is smooth sailing, if not still a little bit busy. It's at the very least everything going back to working order. It's a good time to have important discussions. Monday and Tuesday may not be the best day for airing something or for sitting down to have any kind of necessary chat, but Wednesday could very well be the day for that. And in absence of any needed conversation, Wednesday is generally a day of taking care of your domestic realm. It's favorable for public speaking, for getting your point across to others, and giving a personal opinion, taking care of your errands, the quick, fast to dos on that list that keeps growing, and really be alert to have someone specifically ask for your opinion on something around the midweek mark. And if you are asked for your opinion, there's no need for censorship here. Say it honestly and say it well. It seems like you won't be misunderstood, and what you need to say lands perfectly. And then the week really, really starts on Friday, which is kind of weird to say because mentally we think of Friday as the end of the business week. And with our human earthly use of time, it is. Friday is the end of the week. But the cool thing is, outside of the constructs of time that we've created, time also exists in billions of other dimensions and directions. Your timing is different from my timing, is different from your neighbor's timing. Every individual person has a different tempo. And while we do all adhere to this universal time because that's how things function currently, I'm definitely a huge advocate for learning and understanding your own time. For example, the whole New Year celebration is this big group thing where we honor a new year. But did you know that your new year, your personal new year, literally starts on your birthday? And it becomes really obvious when you think of it, but your birthday signifies a literal new year for you. So, yeah, there are a ton of ways that time is split and fractalized into self similar components that are specific to you. And while Monday is Monday and it always will be Monday, that Monday feeling that comes and goes, this week really gets some ignition on Friday, July 4th. On this day, first, we have Venus conjunct Uranus in Taurus at a critical degree. It's the 29th degree of Taurus. 29 degrees is considered a critical degree because it is the final degree of any sign before the sign switches into the next. So we go from 29 degrees of Aries to 0 degrees of Taurus. We go from 29 degrees of Taurus to 0 degrees of Gemini. So it really is this exit passageway. So whenever you see 29 degrees in a chart or in the astrology for a week, maybe 29 degrees shows up in your natal chart. It's kind of not really breathtaking necessarily, but it's very tense with anticipation. An interesting astrology tidbit of information about 29 degrees of Taurus specifically is that it is considered a bankruptcy degree. And sometimes people with planets at 29 degrees of Taurus have experiences of financial issues and problems and even ruin, maybe to the point of full bankruptcy, or perhaps they are morally bankrupt. And I have a few interesting examples. The first is share. Cher has her sun at 29 degrees of Taurus, and while she never actually filed bankruptcy, she did come dangerously close to filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1980. She did manage to avert this because a real estate buyer paid off her debts in full. But her story is that in the late 60s to 70s, her marriage and partnership with Sonny Bono left her heavily, heavily indebted. And at one point, it was said that she was still owing around $270,000 in back taxes. Later in her career, she revealed that she had lost all the money she had ever earned and had to rebuild. And she did this rebuilding via a Las Vegas residency that helped her stabilize her finances. And that's Cher with her sun at 29 degrees of Taurus. Another example is the late River Phoenix. His moon was in the 29th degree of Taurus, this bankruptcy degree that we're assessing, and it was after his death that insurance and production companies sued his estate. And it's wild to think about a posthumous lawsuit, but yes, this happened, and they were claiming that his overdose prevented completion of the film Dark Blood. What a lovely, nice, and sensitive approach to human life and suffering this was. And perhaps you can feel my sarcasm there, but this lawsuit was about the perceived financial losses for the movie because of his overdose. And they sought upwards of 5.5, I think it even said $6 million in claims. And the lawsuit against Phoenix's estate were ultimately dropped, but the producers initially sued Phoenix's mother for the $5.5–6 million and later abandoned the claim. And this is particularly interested as it was River Phoenix's moon at the 29th degree of Taurus, and we know that the moon represents the mother in astrology. So that 29-degree bankrupt Taurus energy with his moon signifying mother may have told some of the story of his mother and his estate being sued after he passed. One more example, and this one is a goodie. It's not really a goodie in terms of the person, but it really lines up with that morally, materially bankrupt energy of the Taurus 29th degree. With his natal chart Venus placement in this 29th degree, Bernard Madoff is the last example I'll use. And perhaps maybe I'll do a bankruptcy episode in and of itself to explore this degree in multiple directions. But for the purpose of today's episode, and just highlighting the different planets in this very sensitive and difficult degree, these are the three I'm looking at. Bernard Madoff was the man behind the largest Ponzi scheme in history. He never filed for personal bankruptcy. However, his financial situation was complex and ultimately quite bloody disastrous. He was arrested in December of 2008. His estimated net worth at the time of arrest between him and his wife, Ruth, was a combined net worth of approximately $823 million to $826 million, which included $700 million in ownership of Bernard L. Madoff Investments Securities LLC, $22 million in real estate holdings across places like Manhattan, Palm Beach, and even France, $17 million in cash. I have to say that twice. $17 million in cash. $9.3 million in boats, $12 million in a half share of a charter jet, $45 million in securities, $2.6 million in jewelry belonging to his wife, $104,000 in personal items, which it was mentioned like a Steinway piano, and the cost of his silverware. And so hearing that, you would go and say that this is not someone materially bankrupt. They have a lot, 17 million in cash. But with his Ponzi scheme, you could definitely categorize this as morally bankrupt. But then, despite these assets, his whole financial empire was built on deception. He had no retirement accounts, no 401k plans. Additionally, he had no offshore or Swiss bank accounts, and none of those riches even so much as slightly mattered in 2009 when Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 criminal charges, including securities fraud and money laundering, and was sentenced to 150 years in prison. He was also ordered to forfeit $17 billion. And so that's the point. He became financially bankrupt as well as morally. And the US government seized and auctioned off his assets, including the real estate properties and personal items, to compensate the defrauded investors. So, thanks for coming with me through this explanation of a degree in its real time application by looking at the public stories that we do have access to that support these degree theories. The point of this was really just to say that since June 17th and lasting through to July 7th, Uranus has been in this bankruptcy degree. So maybe you'll have seen or experienced some sudden upheavals, financial surprises, or situations where old structures around money, values, and security are breaking down or just being forced to radically change. Sometimes painfully, sometimes in a liberating way. This is a time of exposing vulnerabilities, of forcing accountability and highlighting where things are questionable and unsustainable, and sometimes leading to significant losses or resets. While the 29th degree of Taurus, this bankruptcy degree, often symbolizes endings, disruption, or financial crisis, it does have a subtle positive meaning, which is all about the certainty which grows out of harmony. And this suggests that after chaos or after breakdown, there is an opportunity for clarity and realignment. The 29th degree of Taurus holds a kind of peak potential for correction in all things Venus, all things Uranus, and all things Taurus, which are matters of money, paper cash money, bank money, and digital money. It's matters of the stock market, it's food, it's the internet, and it's the collective freedom. With Venus conjunct Uranus on July 4th, there's a lot more than just the fireworks you hear around your neighborhood. There is a specific trend of timing and development with those symbolic mentioned things, which is money, digital money, the stock market, food, the internet, and collective freedom. And the potential is unconventional. This is non traditional. Those things will never be the same again. And this can be a positive. So expect and even look for moments of breakthrough in how the world, but also how you yourself approach finances, resources, and or relationships. This shows up through some unexpected changes or sudden flashes of insight that open you and the world up to more original paths forward. So, initially, this conjunction on July 4th, rather than just being a point of crisis or loss, this degree with Venus conjunct Uranus holds the possibility of revolutionizing how you understand and handle value and connection. Some kind of financial boost, personally or worldly. Look for the patterns in whatever happens in the news or in your personal life, finances and relationship and food wise, Friday through the weekend. July 4th is the day of all the aspects this week. So, as well as this shocking financial conjunction, Venus then leaves Taurus and enters Gemini, and then Neptune begins its annual retrograde. Venus into Gemini is this rich moment, it's a snap turning point. And so, Venus, with its meaning of love, money, values, beauty, and connection, in this surprising conjunction to Uranus with shock, innovation, awakening, and disruption in the final degree of Taurus, which is the most fixed, materially rooted, security driven sign. And then Venus moves into Gemini, which is an air sign ruled by Mercury. This shifts the tone from grounded sensuality and resource stability to movement, to exchange, to conversation, and to having more than one option. So, this is more than one option with money, more than one option with relationships. This is money flying in and out. This is a higher metabolism. This is a need for more nutrients and more food than usual. Venus in Gemini is this quick transition from values based on possession and permanence now to values based on variety. A changing economy becomes more exciting under this transit, and the personal opportunity here, something to consider for yourself, is to let go of outdated attachments to resources as they are or as you think that they should flow, and move into a more agile, expressive form of value and connection. This is a time to take what has been shaken loose in money and resources, in relationships and attachments, in creative work and your identity. So, in money and resources, this might be a stable job or income source that suddenly feels misaligned. And it pushes you to rethink what you're actually working for. A financial shift, whether a loss or gain, or maybe devaluation of some sort, it forces you to reprioritize how you spend, save, and invest. In connection, in relationships, there might be a single comment or a moment during this ingress of Venus into Gemini. Something said that reveals a deeper value or a clash in a relationship that you thought was solid. And this may be when you start to question why you are still tied to people or dynamics that don't reflect who you're becoming. And Venus moving into Gemini will be especially potent for you if you have planets or angles in your chart that are in the early mutable signs. So if your chart shows planets and angles in early Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, this will be bigger for you. So Venus in Gemini for the collective global news cycle can bring shifts in markets, especially related to commodities, currencies, or technology. You may see something drop off or something spike out of nowhere, particularly with luxury goods, crypto, or even property. Expect a lot of celebrity relationships or celebrity money headlines, like a sudden divorce or a brand that's dissolving or a scandal that reflects moral exposure. Venus is also the ultimate feminine. So breakthroughs in women's rights, in beauty standards, or financial independence, or, you know, financial changes, especially for women or marginalized identities, even. It's all those Venus themes as Venus enters Gemini, which is a sign of media and dialogue and exposure and duality. We could see a private story become public, a hidden value become marketable, or a financial, female, or social media trend becomes the center of news. And now on to Neptune's retrograde this year, and it's just worth mentioning that we are still on July 4th. Fireworks are not at all necessary because the fireworks are legit happening with all of these sparks of connection of planetary angles and aspects happening in the solar system. But this is the final astrology movement on 4th of July. This is Neptune's retrograde. And Neptune does go retrograde once a year for about 5 months at a time, so it's not rare. And it's not as personally disruptive as, say, a Mercury or a Mars retrograde. It's much more slow, subtle. It tends to work in the background of things. And you won't really feel it in the moment. But that doesn't mean that it's meaningless. It's a retrograde that's actually kind of cool and very much underestimated because, in its direct motion, when it's traveling direct from the perspective of Earth, Neptune's usual influence is to blur things. It's to romanticize, to idealize, or even to delude people and situations. And so, in the nature of a retrograde functioning in contrast to a planet's usual direct effects, that means the confusion and uncertainty of Neptune direct, when Neptune turns retrograde, the fog is removed. Neptune's cloudiness begins to lift as it moves retrograde. And this happens slowly, quietly, and steadily. It's like a long progression where confusion begins to ease. And as it does begin to ease, you might start seeing certain things more clearly than you realized you could. It's a much less spiritual time. There's a lot less spiritual downloads. There's a lot more waking up from a fantasy that maybe you didn't even know that you were in. So during this Neptune backtrack, you might start seeing a person or a situation for what or who they really are and not what you had hoped for. This is off comes the rose colored glasses. You could begin to easily identify where you've been in an escapist mode, whether that's through substances, distractions, or illusions. And it offers this kind of gaining of clarity around where you've been avoiding truth or using aesthetic or even spiritual ideas as a mask. Like the very toxic, high vibe only perspective that actually is a form of avoidance. You know, saying everything happens for a reason or love and light, instead of acknowledging real conflict, harm, and emotional pain, whether it's yours or someone else's. This is a time of no more avoiding hard conversations or avoiding accountability by hiding behind positivity. And it's also no more manifestation as magical thinking, using manifestation to apply blame to misfortune, thinking that you or somebody else attracted a situation, you manifested a situation, instead of acknowledging that sometimes stuff just happens due to systemic issues, due to genuine luck, or to real world limitation. So when Neptune goes retrograde, it's not about punishing this behavior, it's more about asking yourself the difficult questions, noticing contradictions, and realizing a truth that you've maybe spiritually bypassed for a while. Neptune entered Aries this year with a bold shift into spirituality becoming very personal, and it will also become quite confrontational. With Neptune in Aries, empathy becomes aggressive or even cut off, and chasing the dream is no longer a passive activity with this Neptune in Aries. But during the retrograde, this degree point carries the meaning of recuperation, and you cannot be passive in your recuperation anymore. It's not slow massages and walks and grounding and thinking and journaling. The softness turns sharp, stripped down, bare, naked, and direct. And actually, that's quite a good idea. It's a very good Neptune retrograde in Aries thing where possible to walk around naked a little bit more. Obviously, inside your home, not in public, of course. But yeah, this recuperation under the retrograde isn't about floating or reflecting endlessly. It's about actively reclaiming energy that's been drained by false starts, by ego driven goals, or chasing approval. Neptune's retrograde at 2 degrees of Aries forces a reckoning with where your drive has been aimless. The question to ask yourself this week and for the next 5 months is, what are you fighting for? And is it even real? Are you fighting for something above your pay grade? Are you caring about things that in doing so is causing you burnout? Recuperation at this degree means facing the true case of your exhaustion or your spiritual depletion, not medicating discomfort, not distracting from it, but letting the truth emerge unfiltered, pulling back from codependent patterns or false rescue missions. You know, those false rescue missions are when you step in to help or heal or fix someone or something, not because it's actually effective or needed, and not even because anyone will listen, but you do so because it soothes your own discomfort, guilt, or need to feel useful. This is a big day and all happening on the July 4th celebrations of the birthday of the USA. Every year I do a July 4th episode. It's a kind of solar return reading for the United States where I walk through what the USA's birth chart is showing for the year ahead, checking out the dates and the time frames, some of the predictions, and they end up landing pretty accurately, and other predictions offer insights that spark curiosity. The most valuable part, though, is really that it's all based purely on the astrology, on the planetary placements and the aspects and the timing of the natal chart of the USA. It is not at all based on the headlines. It's not based on the spin that's being aired in that moment. And this can be seen in review of last year's episode predictions, where the dates for the attempted assassination of Donald Trump showed up. That was interesting to forecast. And also the trade war and tariff issues. All of these things were noted and explained and expressed back in July of 2024, mentioned in the episode and time stamped and dated for back then. So, July last year, I was talking about a trade war that ended up transpiring in March of this year, 2025. So, if you're into astrology, not just for your own personal use, but to understand the cycles of time in the world and the country and what next year might look like for this whole material, economic, and living experience as a collective, make sure you're subscribed to the show for that drop on Friday, July 4th. The USA solar return birthday reading is especially potent if you live in the USA. The rest of this week, after that big July 4th date that is chock full of aspects pulling in so many different directions, a kind of wake up moment, a click of fingers coming to reality. Then next is July 6th, with Venus in Gemini sextile Saturn in Aries, and the theme is practical over personal. So this Venus Saturn sextile brings a sober approach to relationships, connections, value, and money. Resources are now built more on purpose than passion. So this is a lot of trade offs where you give up something in order to get something else that's more important or more fruitful or more lasting. This aspect also signifies relationships with age differences. It also signifies investments for long term gain rather than quick results. Venus in Gemini's tendency towards selective and maybe even restrictive energy meets Saturn in Aries' survivalist clarity. There is no tolerance for any kind of emotional or wasteful excess. It's about choosing partners and choosing investments based on what works long term, not just what feels exciting in the moment. The final astrological aspect of this aspect heavy week, where everything seems to happen isolated between Friday and Sunday. So, this is one heck of a holiday weekend. The final aspect is Venus in Gemini sextile Neptune in Aries. Remembering that Neptune at this point will now be retrograde, so that this is a reality check, this aspect might show up as growth of your self awareness. You go through this careful analysis of your own behavior and its impact on others, or you may hone in on where you've been overlooking the faults of others, maybe where you've been a little bit over tolerant. And this isn't a bad thing. The sextile aspect here is a dose of truth, paired with Neptune retrograde in Aries' theme of recuperation. It's healing that comes from facing reality. This can be acceptance of someone the way they are. This can be realizing that some people, including yourself, can't and maybe won't change certain habits and behaviors because that is exactly who they are meant to be. Each and every individual person you know and you yourself possesses a nature based 26 archetypal traits. And this whole nature versus nurture thing isn't really a versus argument at all. It's a blending of the both. And so you and everybody else are born with 26 distinct purposeful traits that either function as they should or they function a little bit broken. But they're the same theme of traits nonetheless. And then on top of that, nature offers you things to learn and embody, but they're not you as a talented entity the way that these nature based 26 traits show up. Recuperation here is acceptance of inherent patterns and skills. It's accepting your strengths, your weaknesses, your conditioned responses, and also the strengths, weaknesses, and conditioned responses of others too, rather than fighting or denying them. Healing and transformation happen when you acknowledge your true nature and you allow it, rather than resisting or trying to be something that you're not. Knowing your 26 traits actually helps you identify where you naturally shine and where you may struggle or get stuck. And this is also relevant for anyone you love or share life with. Knowing their natural 26 traits helps you stop being annoyed at their habitual reactions or their behaviors. And instead, you understand that these patterns are just an essential part of who they are. And this is a potent reading to get outside of astrology predictions, looking at the next few months, forecasting, and such. The 26 traits reading is something I think everybody should consider. Knowing exactly your 26 biggest gifts, or maybe even the 26 biggest gifts of someone you care about, so that you can love yourself better, so that you can love someone else the way they need to be. The 26 traits reading is a very detailed, in depth look at your nature. And the details of this reading are in the show notes below. So, to recap on this week where it's like 7 days that are crammed into just 2 to 3 days over the holiday weekend. Monday's mood is that things don't go to plan, frustration peaks when everything doesn't meet your standards, and it's just a reminder to give yourself space and accept imperfection and make sure you eat enough for your energetic needs. Tuesday's surprise is an unexpected shift or benefit that softens from Monday's tension, and it shows you the value in life's unpredictability. Wednesday's clarity is where communication flows smoothly, making it a day for honest conversations and getting your point across effectively. Friday, July 4th's intensity with the Venus-Uranus conjunction signals major financial and value-based shakeups, exposing cracks but also opening doors for radical change, and a little bit of moral kind of bankruptcy in the air that just comes to act as a reset. Venus moving into Gemini, values and relationships shift from stability to variety. Neptune's retrograde in Aries strips illusion, and it forces a tough but necessary look at what's truly draining your energy to find out where real healing begins. And then through the weekend with Venus sextile Saturn, relationships and finances demand practical, mature, disciplined choices and maybe even a trade off that leads to long term stability. And then Venus sextiles Neptune, a moment of deep self awareness, inviting acceptance of yourself and others exactly as you are, grounding compassion in reality rather than idealism. And don't forget to check out below the 26 traits reading, where I walk you through your 26 traits, how they function best, and what they look like when they're kind of malfunctioning and not offering you the best of what they can bring. This is called your not self version. Looking at the not self and the self is ideal for healing during this time and embracing your inherent traits, reducing frustration and resistance, which then opens the door to more growth and acceptance. This was your part one of the week ahead astrology. Part two, individual horoscopes, will be back tomorrow. And then, of course, the July 4th episode on Friday, which I'm so excited to do because already, straight off rip, we are seeing some kind of ally issue by the time we enter Leo season. Make sure you're following the show. I'll be back with more astrology information. Until then, bye.